Sell your phone to get home. That's what my son texted me. No punctuation, no explanation, just 7 words, sent like he was reminding me to pick up milk. I was standing outside at the arrivals curb at JFK, one hand on my suitcase, the other still holding the phone, staring at that message like maybe I'd read it wrong. But I hadn't. The words just sat there, cold and final, like the wind cutting through Terminal C. I'm Blake Monroe. I'm 71. 2 days ago, I buried my husband. We were married 44 years. Yesterday, I flew home alone, still wearing the same black cardigan I had on at the funeral. And this morning, my only son left me stranded at the airport. Not even enough cash for a cab. I looked around, half expecting to see him pulling up to the curb, maybe giving that sheepish smile like this was some twisted joke. But nothing. Just spring breakers and college kids with duffel bags, hugging their friends, slamming van doors, laughing like life was just beginning. Mine felt like it had stopped. I hadn't seen David since the funeral. He and Lindsay came just long enough to give their polished little eulogies and whisper to the estate attorney about logistics. Lindsay barely looked at me. She looked perfect, though. She always does. Hair in a tight bun, beige coat, not a wrinkle anywhere. But even her silence had sharp edges. And that text? It hit harder because I remembered another one. Years ago, when David was trying to launch his first tech startup. He didn't have the money, so I sold my engagement ring. "You're my hero, Mom," he wrote back then. Now he was telling me to go pawn my phone. I found a bench inside the terminal, the kind with the hard metal armrests that make sure you can't lie down. My phone battery was at 8%. I had $24 in cash, most of it coins. My debit card? Back at the house. His house. A man in a yellow vest walked over. "Ma'am, do you need help?" I almost said yes. Almost let the tears spill out right there. But I didn't. "No, thank you," I said, folding my hands in my lap. He nodded and moved on. And I just sat there, watching the automatic doors open and close, over and over again. Each time letting in a gust of cold air, and another reminder that I wasn't worth waiting for. People say grief is loud. Mine wasn't. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It just sat inside me, like something slowly coming undone. The woman who walked into that terminal, she was a mother, a wife, someone who still thought she mattered. The one sitting there now, she wasn't so sure. Outside, the sky started to dim. The announcements kept droning on. Baggage claims, gate changes, all of it blending into noise. I looked at my reflection in the terminal glass. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, but deep down, I knew. Something had broken. And maybe it needed to. The bus pulled away, rumbling off in a cloud of gravel dust and diesel. I stood there at the edge of a muddy parking lot, suitcase in one hand, Paul's old windbreaker draped around my shoulders. The inn looked exactly how I remembered it. Whitewashed siding, floral curtains behind old wavy windows, and a wooden sign out front that said Wisteria Hollow, Est 1919. A little more worn down than it was 40 years ago, but honestly, so was I. "Are you sure you want to check in here, ma'am?" the innkeeper asked. She peeked over the counter. Her name tag said Marla. Her voice was soft, like someone who spends a lot of time in quiet. "It's not very modern," she added, like she thought I might change my mind. "That's the point," I told her, sliding 2 folded bills across the counter. She gave me this curious look, then handed me an actual wooden key, brass tag and everything. I slipped it into my pocket like it was something special. My room was upstairs, second door on the left. The floor creaked with every step, and the wallpaper was covered in faded peonies. No TV, just a half-filled bookshelf and a radio that only played static. There was a crocheted blanket at the foot of the bed, looked just like the one Paul and I had in our first apartment. I ran my hand over it, and something inside me softened. Back then, we didn't have much, a few mismatched dishes, a leaky faucet, but we had each other. I closed my eyes and almost heard him humming, the way he did when we danced barefoot in the kitchen, pasta boiling over on the stove. I smiled. It was the first time my face had remembered how to do that since the funeral. I unpacked slowly. Then I pulled out the journal I hadn't touched in years. At first, the pen felt heavy in my hand, but once I started, the words just spilled out. I don't want to go back, not just to the city, but to who I was yesterday. I stopped writing, but the sentence stayed with me. It echoed. Later that evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, I found the trail behind the inn. The mud clung to my shoes as I climbed, but I didn't care. The air smelled like thawing earth, like spring was trying to push through. At the top of the hill, I pulled a small velvet pouch from my coat pocket. I hadn't told anyone I brought part of Paul with me. Not David, not Lacey. They wouldn't have understood. I opened the pouch and let the ashes drift into the breeze. Some clung to my hand, like they weren't quite ready to go. I whispered, "You can rest now." Whether I meant it for him or for myself, I didn't know. The sky lit up in pink and orange, and I just stood there, empty-handed, but somehow lighter. I didn't know what came next, but one thing was clear. I was done being quiet. She's an adult. She'll be fine. Just find her a place and send a check. Lindsay's voice cut through the late afternoon air like broken glass. I froze behind the trunk of a big maple tree, the bark cold against my back, and I listened. They hadn't seen me when they pulled in, too caught up in their conversation, too comfortable with speakerphone. I don't think it even crossed their minds that I might be standing just 20 feet away, right outside the diner, hearing every single word. "David," Lindsay went on, "we can't keep dancing around this. She's not helpless. She just needs structure. That place in Connecticut looks decent." "She hated Connecticut," David said flatly. No emotion, just stating it like it was a random fact. "But yeah, fine. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. I'll handle it. We'll just tell her it's temporary." I had called him earlier that morning, left a message, just wanted to say I was okay. Didn't say where I was, didn't say why, just that I was alive. Something small, a reflex, a mother thing. He hadn't called me back, but something told me to stay put. So I lingered outside the diner, coffee in hand, going cold. I watched as his sleek new SUV rolled in and parked a few spaces away from mine. I should have walked off the second I heard his voice, but I didn't. "I mean," David added, "she's got her Social Security, right? She'll be fine." I blinked slowly. There was something so clean, so distant in his tone, like I was no longer a person, just a problem to solve, a checkbox. I waited until they pulled out. Then I stepped back inside. The little bell above the door chimed. Inside, it still smelled like bacon and burnt toast. The same waitress from earlier looked up from the coffee pot. "Back so soon, hun?" "Yeah," I said, "just needed a little more time." She smiled. "Refill?" I nodded and slid back into the same booth by the window. She brought the coffee and a slice of cherry pie, said it was on the house. "You looked like you needed it," she said gently. I stirred the cream in slow circles, just watching it settle. My wallet was on the table. I opened it without really thinking, and an old photo slipped out. David, maybe 7 years old, arms wrapped around my neck, frosting on his face. I could still remember the card he made that year. "Mom, you're the nicest person in the world," written in crayon. The S in nicest was backward. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I picked up my phone, opened my email, and typed a short message to my lawyer. Let's talk next week. I have changes to make. I didn't write what those changes were. Not yet. But I knew. My coffee was cooling again. Outside, the shadows stretched long across the parking lot. The air smelled like gasoline and blooming flowers, a strange mix, like morning and springtime all tangled up. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was awake. And waking up, that changes everything. If you've ever stood somewhere, like a diner parking lot, with a heart full of things you just can't say out loud, maybe you know what I felt that day. And if you do, I'd really love to hear your story. Leave me a comment, even just one sentence. I'm listening. And if this feels like a journey you want to take with me, hit that subscribe button. There's more ahead. Things I couldn't have imagined when I first walked into that old inn. The next chapter? Let's just say it's where I stop being quiet. I thought you were in your room, David said. His hands were shoved deep in the pockets of that expensive coat he always wears now. He always looks like he's on his way to somewhere more important. No, David, I said, calm and clear. I was right outside the car, listening. We were standing in the gravel lot behind the motel. The afternoon sun had dropped low, casting long shadows across the pavement. His SUV sat nearby, engine humming quietly, exhaust curling into the cold spring air. Lindsay was in the passenger seat, pretending to scroll on her phone. But I could feel it. She was listening to every word. He finally looked at me, mouth tight. It wasn't meant to sound like that. It didn't sound like anything, David. It was what it was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Silence does its own kind of talking when the truth is heavy. I mean, we were tired and worried. We didn't know where you were. Lindsay just... He trailed off, glancing toward the car like maybe she'd save him from finishing that sentence. I didn't move. The gravel crunched under his shoe as he shifted, awkward. You once asked me what trust was, I said, quietly. Do you remember what I told you? He blinked. Mom, come on. I said trust is built in whispers, not in announcements, not in big speeches. Whispers. It's the things people say when they think no one's listening. His face tightened, but he didn't say anything. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thin manila envelope. The edges were worn from being packed carefully the night before, right after I'd emailed my lawyer. I held it out to him. What is this? You'll see, I said. It's nothing dramatic, just information. He took it slowly, like it might bite. Mom, if this is about the money, it's not. I folded my arms. This isn't about money. It's about who I am to you, or who I'm not. He didn't answer right away. He just kept flipping the envelope in his hands, like maybe if he stalled long enough, the moment would pass. Out on the highway, a big rig rumbled by. Inside the motel lobby, the desk clerk glanced out the window, watching us from behind the glass. Didn't say anything. Maybe he'd seen scenes like this before. Families standing in parking lots, talking in half-truths. David finally looked up, and for a moment, just one, his eyes softened. You don't have to do this. I already did. He gave a small nod, almost like it was to himself, then turned around and walked back to the car. Lindsay didn't even look up. She just hit the unlock button, and David got in. The SUV pulled away quietly. One crunch of tires over gravel, then the sound of traffic swallowed everything. I didn't cry. There was no dramatic collapse, no sinking down against the bumper of my car, just stillness. And in that stillness, something settled. Not anger, not quite, but something close to clarity, something close to freedom. You shouldn't be alone at your age, the woman at the front desk said when I dropped off my key to go for a walk. I smiled and said, then it's a good thing I'm not lonely. Back in my motel room that night, the lamp still flickered, and the curtains were this dull yellow color that made you wonder if the light was even on. But I liked the stillness. It reminded me of when I was 43, camping solo in Colorado for 2 nights. No cell signal, no one asking for anything. Just me, a fire, and stars that stretched on forever. I remember lying in that tent, thinking, this is what wholeness feels like. Just existing, no expectations. That morning, Cold Spring smelled like wet stone and pine. I walked toward town, past a little thrift store and an old bulletin board covered in faded flyers, lost dogs, quilting clubs, piano lessons. The library sat beside a red brick church with stained glass in the reading room. Inside, it was warm, smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. I wandered the shelves, not really looking for anything, just wanted to be somewhere, quiet, with a sense of purpose. Then I heard her voice. "Don't bother with that one," she said, pointing to the book in my hand. "They kill off the dog for no reason. I nearly threw it out the window." I looked up and saw her, about my age. Short white curls, bright floral scarf, and these glasses that made her look permanently unimpressed. "I'm Francine," she said, "former librarian, lifelong cynic." "Blake," I said, "recovering mother." She laughed, a dry, knowing kind of laugh. One of those chapters. We ended up sitting near the window, talking about books that let us down and books that somehow saved us. She had 2 grown sons. Neither of them called unless they needed something. "I used to send them birthday cards with $5 in them," she said, just to make a point. I liked her. Later that day, I walked back into the diner. Same waitress, Joni, refilled my coffee without asking. "You planning to stick around a bit, sweetheart?" "Maybe," I said, just breathing for a while. She grinned. "Well, we do potluck at the rec center on Tuesday nights. Old folks, young folks, weird casseroles. You should come. I make a mean banana pudding." I told her I'd think about it. Back at the library, Francine and I picked up our conversation like no time had passed. I mentioned the airport, just a quick line or two, no details. Her eyes softened, but she didn't say sorry. She just nodded and said, "You're here now." That afternoon, I caught myself humming. Not because I was exactly happy, but because, for once, I wasn't bracing for the next bruise. We sat outside on a wooden bench that creaked under us. "You seem like someone who's been too polite for too long," Francine said, handing me half of her granola bar. "I suppose I have been," I said. I looked out at the little town square. A flower shop with a crooked sign, a boy skateboarding past the bakery. And something settled in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but something like breath. I wasn't ready to call it revenge, but I was ready to stop being erased. She froze the account. David's voice was flat, like he couldn't quite believe it. He stared at his laptop screen like it had just betrayed him. Lindsay didn't even look up. She kept stirring her kale smoothie with that metal straw. "Good," she said eventually. "Maybe now we can finally talk about the nursing home." Their Manhattan condo was quiet. Only sound was the soft hum of the baby monitor on the counter. No one had picked up the toddler in 15 minutes. The orchid on the kitchen island had dropped a petal overnight. Lindsay stepped right over it. David leaned back in his chair. "She didn't even warn me. One day it's just unavailable, locked, all of it." Lindsay opened a drawer and started sorting through papers. "She warned you months ago. I warned you too. If you don't rein her in, she'll make her own choices. That's what I said, and here we are." He flinched. She was right, but did she have to enjoy it so much? The digital photo frame on the counter blinked through family snapshots, holidays, matching sweaters. Blake was in all of them, always half smiling, always off to the side. David clicked to another tab and made a call. Gary? Yeah, hey, it's David Monroe. Quick question. My mother and I have a shared emergency account, and it looks like she's changed permissions. Any way to reverse that? There was a pause. Then Gary replied, calm and professional. Hi, David. I see the account. I'm afraid since both parties had equal rights and she initiated the freeze herself, it's completely within her legal authority. I can send documentation if needed. No, that's fine. He hung up. Lindsay was already holding a stack of brochures. Here, she said, 2 options in Rhinebeck, 1 in Connecticut. Modern, low maintenance, safe. David blinked. You were ready with those. I've been ready. He didn't say anything, just sat there, shoulders slightly slumped, hands still hovering over the keyboard. She's not helpless, you know, he said quietly. Lindsay turned toward him. No, she's not. That's the problem. The baby monitor beeped. Neither of them moved. David scrolled back through the photos and landed on one from Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Blake carving the turkey, apron on, sleeves rolled up. The kids were on their phones, and for the first time, he noticed how tired her eyes looked. I'll text her, he said. Lindsay didn't look up. Be nice. He typed. Hey, Mom, hope you're okay. Lindsay and I were thinking we might come visit. Just want to check in, see how you're doing. He stared at the screen, then hit send. Back in Cold Spring, my phone buzzed. It was sitting beside a bowl of blackberries. David's name lit up on the screen, and I could see the start of his message. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I turned the phone face down and looked out the window, toward the hill behind the inn. The same spot where Paul and I once sat wrapped in a blanket, listening to spring peepers, long before we had a son who'd forget the sound of my voice. I smiled, not bitterly, but with clarity. Let's see how they do without my silence, I said softly. And I meant it. If someone's ever tried to manage your life like you weren't still living it, maybe you understand why I didn't answer that message. And if you've ever chosen silence, not because you were afraid, but because it finally gave you power, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable. I want to know I'm not the only one. And if you've made it this far with me, you might want to stick around, because next time, something unexpected happens, and not just to me. Don't act like you're some victim. That's what David wrote. No hello, no punctuation, just those words, like a slap laid flat on the table. I read the message 3 times, once in shock, once in confusion, and the 3rd time because some old part of me still thought maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, there it was, clear, cold. I was standing in the little kitchen of the rental, a forkful of cold pasta frozen midair. The TV was humming in the background, something about foxes hunting at dusk. I wasn't even watching. And then it hit, the reflex, that old urge to explain, to fix it, to make everything okay again. The same instinct I had when David was 5 and scraped his knee running through the yard. Back then, I'd pull him close and whisper, "You're brave, you're good, you're safe." But now my fingers hovered over the keyboard, then slowly curled away. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Francine. "Evening," she said, chewing on something crunchy. "What's going on?" I read her the message, word for word. She didn't even pause. "Sounds like a tantrum in grown-up grammar," she said. "Next, he'll be threatening to hold his breath until you unfreeze his allowance." I laughed, one of those sharp, sudden ones that catches you off guard. Francine had a way of cutting through drama like it was nothing. I told her I still felt bad, though, like guilt was swimming around inside me, trying to find somewhere to land. She got quiet, then said, "You feel bad because you raised him to believe your life belonged to him. That's not your fault, but it's not your job anymore either." After we hung up, I finally opened the mail that had been sitting on the counter all day. Just a few flyers, a utility bill, and one pale yellow pamphlet. It had a picture of a smiling woman in front of a tour bus. Silver Horizons, Local Seniors Travel Club, Rediscover the Road. I turned it over. Trips to Colorado, the Grand Canyon, even Ireland. But it wasn't the destinations that got me. It was the idea of moving, not running away from something, but moving towards something again. After Paul died, I stopped traveling, said it didn't feel right to go anywhere without him. But maybe the truth was, I didn't know how to go anywhere as me. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mom, just me. I turned off the TV, carried my phone to the bedroom, and sat at the edge of the bed. The bedside lamp flickered faintly, like it wasn't sure if it should stay or leave. I opened David's message again, stared at it for a moment. Then I typed, "I'm not acting. I just stopped hiding." I didn't wait for a reply, didn't need one. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the travel club flyer, and circled the meeting date with a pen. Tuesday. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt lighter. I paid for that condo, remember? It just slipped out, somewhere between the bean salad and the second round of bingo. Not loud, not bitter, just real. No one flinched. Francine even gave a little and passed me the cornbread. I hadn't planned on saying it out loud, but sometimes a truth lives too long in silence, and eventually it starts scratching at the walls. The community center smelled like chili and carpet cleaner. The folding chairs wobbled just enough to remind me of old church basements and PTA meetings. There was this warmth in the room, laughter about grandkids, arguments over whether olives belong in casseroles, someone's bad hip predicting rain. I hadn't felt that kind of comfort in years. Francine introduced me around like I was royalty. "This is Blake," she said. "She's got good hair and better boundaries than the rest of us." I laughed, a real laugh. During dessert, Nora sat down next to me. Tall, calm, steel gray curls, and eyes that made you feel seen. "You're not from here," she said. Not a question. "No," I replied, "just passing through. At least that was the plan." She didn't dig, just nodded and sipped her tea. After a quiet moment, she asked gently, "So what stopped you from heading back?" I hesitated, then gave her the short version. The airport, the silence, the condo I paid for but didn't feel welcome in anymore. I braced for the usual, soft head tilts, pitying "oh, honeys," but instead, Nora leaned in and asked, "You still have the paperwork?" "Of course," I said. "Copies at the rental, originals are in a safe deposit box." "Good," she said, calm, steady. "If you ever need someone who knows how to handle family entanglements, I know a few discreet professionals, totally separate from all the noise." Something shifted in me right then, like a window cracked open. It wasn't about lawsuits. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about remembering I still had a name on things. That mom didn't mean doormat. Francine dropped into the seat next to us with a paper plate of lemon bars. "You two planning a coup or just gossiping?" "Little of both," Nora said, without missing a beat. We all laughed. But I tucked Nora's card into my purse with more care than I gave most things these days. I spent the rest of the evening soaking it all in. That strange lightness that doesn't come from joy exactly, but from being around people who aren't waiting for you to shrink. I watched a man in suspenders teach a woman in orthopedic shoes how to line dance. Saw someone sneak an extra brownie into her purse like it was contraband. I smiled until my face actually ached. Later that night, back in the rental, I turned on the lamp, made a cup of mint tea, and pulled out the notebook I always kept zipped in my suitcase. The one I used to track doctor's appointments, passwords, David's school forms. But this time, I flipped to a blank page. I wrote, "Revised Will, Draft 1. Just that." I wasn't planning anything drastic, not yet, but it felt good to write it in my own hand. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I was done rewarding silence. The only legacy I really cared about now was leaving behind the version of me that waited to be asked. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just passing through anymore. She's talking to a lawyer. Lindsay's voice cracked, sharp and sudden, like glass under pressure. David looked up from his phone, eyes narrowing. "Where'd you hear that?" "Carl," she said. "He saw her leaving that little office next to the bakery on 4th, the one with the green awning." She walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside like Blake might suddenly appear out on their sidewalk. David sank into a stool at the kitchen counter. The coffee machine hissed behind him, one lonely mug rattling as if it could feel the tension. The TV was on mute, headlines scrolling by, completely ignored. "She probably just needed to update something," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Lindsay turned to him. "You told me she wouldn't go that far, that she'd calm down." "She's still my mother," he muttered, like that still counted for something. Lindsay scoffed. "You think that matters? Sentiment doesn't mean a thing in probate court." The baby monitor let out a soft buzz, a little rustle, maybe a hiccup. Neither of them moved. David pulled out his phone and tried calling again, straight to voicemail. "She's screening," he said. "Of course she is. She's playing chess now, and you gave her the board." He rubbed his temples, like the headache had already made itself at home. "This is just overreaction. She's not what?" Lindsay cut in. "Unreasonable? Dramatic?" She stared at him. "Did you ever finalize the deed transfer for the condo?" Silence. "You said it was done." "It was almost done," he admitted. "She wanted more time. Then Paul died. I didn't think it was the right moment to push." Lindsay went pale, then red. "So legally, she still owns the whole thing?" David didn't say a word. She snatched her phone and put it on speaker, dialed their financial advisor. "Hi, Darren. Quick question. Do you have confirmation if Blake Munro made any recent changes to her estate plan?" A short pause, then Darren's smooth, steady voice. "She requested an independent review. That's fully within her rights." Lindsay hung up before he could finish. David looked at her. "We can't just accuse her of being unstable." "She left her son at an airport," Lindsay snapped, "and now she's rewriting wills behind our backs?" "She paid for that condo," he said quietly. Lindsay stared at him, like she didn't even recognize the man sitting in front of her. And if she changes that will, that condo could end up with some stray cat foundation in Vermont. "She's still my mother," David said again. But this time, the words didn't land. They sounded thinner, like he was saying them out of habit, not conviction. Lindsay leaned over her laptop and typed Blake Munro into Facebook. Her eyes narrowed. "She updated her profile," she muttered. "Photos from a potluck, new friends. Look at this. Grateful for new beginnings." She scrolled again. "Never too late to reclaim your life." "She's not just rebuilding," she said. "She's announcing it." David didn't move. Lindsay turned the screen toward him. "You better decide who you're protecting, David, because she's already protecting herself." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast gold across the countertops. Inside, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was strategic. Because sometimes it's not the yelling that gets to you. It's the quiet plans people make when they think you're not paying attention. Have you ever found out someone was planning your life for you, deciding what's best for you without ever asking? If that's happened to you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone. And if you've been following along this far, you probably sense what's coming. Let's just say, not everyone handles it well when the person they underestimated starts writing their own story. Stick around. The next part, it gets interesting. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, no return address. just my full name printed neatly above a bold court letterhead. I didn't open it right away. First, I made tea. Then I fed the neighbor's cat, the one whose owner was still down in Florida. The fire in the living room had burned low. Its light flickered against the walls, casting shadows longer than they should have been. When I finally opened the papers, I felt my chest tighten, but not out of surprise, not anymore. It read, "Petition for limited conservatorship." Apparently, I was now someone who might not have sufficient capacity to manage her own affairs. I called David, told him I wanted to talk, in person, no more texting, no more pretending. He showed up 2 hours later. Lindsay came too, dressed in beige and silence, holding her phone like it was a shield. "We're just trying to protect you," David said the moment he stepped inside. I didn't offer tea. I didn't offer a seat. I just pointed to the documents on the coffee table. "Protect me from what, exactly?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. "From my own bank account? From the will I wrote? From the freedom I've earned?" David shifted. "It's not like that. You've just been different since Dad died." "Yes," I said, "grief does that. So does being left at an airport." Lindsay still hadn't spoken. She leaned against the fireplace, her eyes drifting between me and the scarf I'd left half-finished on the couch. Judging? Measuring? "I haven't missed a mortgage payment. I haven't bounced a check. I paid for your education, David. I co-signed the condo. And now, because I left without asking your permission, you think I'm slipping?" He looked down at the floor. "You changed your will. You changed the rules." The silence after that felt deep and final. Then he said it, softly, like he wanted to catch the words before they landed. "Maybe we don't need to talk for a while." I smiled, not bitter, just tired. "That's a gift, David, not a threat." Lindsay finally cleared her throat. "We're doing what's best for everyone." I turned to her. "You don't get to define best for me." They left a few minutes later. David didn't hug me, didn't look back, and I didn't watch them leave. Instead, I called Francine, told her everything. "You listen to me," she said. "You built a life, a family, a future, and now they want to fence you into the last chapter like it's some pasture. Don't let them steal your sunset, Blake." I laughed. "I won't." Then I called the lawyer. "Let's move forward with everything," I told her. "No more delays. The trusts, the will, the deed transfers, I want my name where it belongs." When I hung up, I sat back down by the fire, picked up my scarf. The yarn slipped through my fingers, row by steady row. Outside, the wind rattled softly against the windows. But inside, everything was still. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't bracing for what came next. I felt like I was becoming someone. I wore red, not to make a statement, not to be the loudest woman in the room, but because Paul once told me it made me look like sunlight. And tonight, I wanted to remember that I was once loved without condition. The rec room was strung with fairy lights. The air smelled like warm bruschetta and something sweet I couldn't quite place, maybe lemon bars. It was a small gathering, mostly folks from our wing, a few staff, and Nora's cousin with his guitar, playing old Fleetwood Mac songs like they were hymns. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said quietly to Francine as she handed me a glass of lavender tea. Not dramatic, just honest. She didn't say anything back, just rested her hand on my shoulder and smiled, like she already knew. There were no speeches, no agenda, just music, paper plates, and people showing up as their full selves. A woman in a teal head wrap danced barefoot. Someone passed around Polaroids from their granddaughter's wedding. Francine wore hot pink flamingo earrings. Nora had on a gold shawl and a drink that definitely wasn't just cider. I stood by the window for a while, watching the fairy lights blink against the dark. Reese, one of the staff, walked over and handed me a plate of chocolate-covered strawberries. "You okay, Blake?" she asked, kind as ever. I nodded. "I think I'm better than okay." I caught my reflection in the window, the soft creases around my eyes, a calm in my posture I hadn't seen in years. For so long, I dressed in shadows, stayed quiet, kept small. I used to think that was grace, but really, it was just habit. Then a woman with silver curls tapped me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said gently. "You're the lady from that condo case, right? The one who froze the account?" I paused, then smiled. "Yes, that's me." "No offense," she said, "but I hope I age into that kind of nerve." I laughed. Not bitter, not defensive, just free. Later, we sat in a loose circle, trading stories about broken dishwashers and good soup when my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "Mom, if you're ever ready to talk, I'll be here." That was it. No apology, no real reflection. Just an open door with no doorknob. I looked at it for a second, then pressed delete. Not out of anger, not even sadness, just because I don't need to carry every bridge with me. Some are better left in the fog. The guitarist started playing Dreams, and someone whooped like it was prom night. I set my tea down, kicked off my shoes, and stepped into the middle of the room. My hips didn't move like they used to. My knees popped a little, but I raised my arms anyway. Wrinkles and all, I danced. Not for anyone, not in spite of anyone, just for me. Somewhere between the lemon bars and that old Sinatra record playing through the courtyard speakers, I realized something. They didn't win. They never did. I was sitting under a crooked patio umbrella, notebook open, crossword puzzle untouched. The late sun brushed gold across the herb garden. Bees were buzzing. The breeze smelled like basil and warm dirt. No drama, no phone buzzing, just stillness. "This life is still mine." I said it out loud this time. Not borrowed, not owed, mine. I had written those words in my journal weeks ago. Back then, they felt like hope more than truth. But now they fit. Like finding your favorite coat buried in the back of a closet. Reese passed by with a basket of garden clippings. She paused, set a few sprigs of basil on my table. "For your tea," she said, smiling. I thanked her. She didn't linger, just kept walking. And that was the kind of space I'd earned. Unhurried, unbothered, respected. I turned back to the papers in my lap. Neat, unsigned, ready. My new will. Fair, clear, free of guilt. No one would be blindsided. No one disinherited out of spite. But no one would be rewarded for cruelty either. I'd updated the trust, added protections, named Reese and Nora as emergency contacts. People who'd looked me in the eye and seen me, not just a burden, not just a role. That morning, I'd spent time on the phone with the bank and a social worker. No tears, no doubts, just details, handled. Then I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "My name is Blake Monroe. I was a wife, I was a mother, and now I am just me." And that's enough. There was no bitterness in it, no drama, no fireworks, just truth. David might call again someday, or he might not. Lindsay might move on to her next target, or not. But I wasn't waiting for either of them. Francine passed by at a distance, waving with a little tilt of her straw hat. I raised my teacup in return. No words, none needed. A hummingbird hovered near the rosemary bush. So close, I could hear the beat of its wings. Then it darted off before I could blink. Beautiful things don't wait for permission. They just show up and shine. I looked down at the crossword. 13 across. Freedom, 5 letters. I smiled, wrote peace. I leaned back, let the sunlight sink into my skin, and closed my eyes. Not from exhaustion, but from fullness. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't escape. This was mine. And it was enough. That last afternoon in the garden, sun warm on my face, I finally knew. I didn't need anyone's permission to feel whole. I had walked through betrayal, through silence, through doubt, and somehow I arrived at peace. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't what other people do to us, it's what we keep allowing because we've forgotten our own worth. But life has a quiet way of reminding us we're allowed to begin again. Even if the ones we raised forget who we are, we don't have to. If this story echoed something in you, I'd love to hear it. You're not alone. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever had to start over too. And if stories like this speak to you, go ahead and subscribe. I'd love for you to stay a while. And when you're ready, I hope you'll join me for the next one. My daughter gave her mother-in-law a $50,000 ring and a cruise for Mother's Day. I got a $5 plastic gift. Trust me, what happens next might feel painfully familiar, but it doesn't end the way you think.